The Stanford Prison Experiment is a thriller film based on true events, which tells the story of the infamous experiment with the same name, conducted in 1971 at the Stanford University in California, in which 24 young guys, who were students at the time, were chosen as volunteers to take part in a simulated jail to play the roles of both prisoners and prison guards. Conducted under the supervision of psychology professor Philip Zimbardo, the idea was to simultaneously examine the effects of one's identity and rights being taken away, being reduced to nothing more than a simple number, and the source of abusive behavior in the prison system, where otherwise good men, good people are put into the situation that gives them the absolute permission to harm other people. The methods the guards were encouraged to apply gave them absolute freedom to use any and all forms of verbal abuse they saw fit, but they were not allowed to use any physical violence. The guards and the prisoners were made equal among themselves, each party were given identical clothing, with the prisoners receiving clothes that resembled rags and tatters more than anything else, and the guards receiving matching uniforms and sunglasses. Because the effect of not seeing someone's eyes makes you feel like that person is less humane in nature. The fuck? Eventually the experiment got more and more out of hand, with the guards becoming more and more sadistic over time, and with the levels of harassment and abuse exceedingly escalating. Even though there was a German movie based on this exact event released back in 2001, this film was actually put into production as way back as 2002. Problems like financing and writer strikes beset and delayed the project for 12 years, which is never really a good sign for a movie. But however, comparing these two films now, I can honestly say that I'm really glad that eventually this one got made as well. The reason being that both of these films are very good, but even though they are based on the same events, the two movies are very different. Das Experiment takes great liberties with the story, in fact being based on a novel that was originally based on the experiment. It utilizes a method of storytelling that is a lot more conventional, a lot more black and white, if you will. In this film we have a much more clear-cut main character, a leader, the one we root for, the one we believe will not cross any moral boundaries. We also have the shady counterpart, about who we're never exactly sure where do his loyalties truly lie. And of course the antagonists, the guards, most of them douchebags to the bitter end. I'm not criticizing Das Experiment, I think it's very good and I definitely recommend it. It's very well directed, it's the same director from Downfall, which is pretty much a perfect movie. But this one felt a lot more action movie-ish to me, rather than a psychological thriller. But I think the Stanford Prison Experiment is much more interesting precisely because of how it doesn't change the facts, how it doesn't exaggerate what actually happened. Allegedly, there were certain things that the filmmakers felt were too distressing to actually put in their film. Yeah. How am I so certain of this, you ask? Well, unlike most so-called films based on true events, this was a very small-scale, predetermined, and highly supervised event that was actually filmed all the way through, and there are several documentaries about it in which you can actually see some of the footage. Also, the actual psychology professor Philip Zimbardo himself has been interviewed several times during these past decades, and there is a very interesting one you can find on DP30, in which he confirms that nothing is exaggerated in the film besides its ending, which was altered a little bit in order to maximize the drama, as he puts it. He also claims that at a certain point, none other than Leonardo DiCaprio and Benicio del Toro were actually considered to play leads in the film. Nothing against these actors, they are great, but I am so grateful that that didn't happen. Because the young cast they eventually chose, even though not all of them resemble physically the actual people they are playing, but I dare to say that everyone in this film was just perfectly cast. These are young actors that I, and probably a vast majority of us, have never seen before. And not only were they very, very good, but also the fact that they were so unfamiliar made the experience much more riveting. The hardest thing for me to do when watching movies is to suspend my disbelief, to actually believe that what I'm watching on screen is real. And this film, mostly thanks to the performances, I would say, nailed it. I would say this effect the film had on me would have been much more diminished had it been with much more familiar faces, much more familiar actors. The similarities the film has to the actual footage is disturbingly uncanny. They even use some of the dialogue, some of the actual dialogue that was spoken on the spot by the subjects of the experiment, and replicated them exactly the same way as lines in the film. And it's fucking eerie, man, let me tell you. Another thing I thought was really interesting and eerily realistic was the fact that we don't really get a main character. I mean, at least for a while during the beginning, you would think that, oh, okay, so it's that guy. But then he just disappears out of the picture, and then you, after a while, you really start to realize that, okay, there isn't really a main character in this film. At the end of the day, each and every person involved in this experiment ended up being sucked into this dehumanizing hellhole, which slowly but surely started clouding the judgment of everyone involved. And it's not just the prisoners and the guards who are affected, it's also the staff members themselves. And I think you should see the movie to find out exactly what happens. It's a disturbing, shocking, highly engrossing experience, and I think it's a great film. Recommend it. That's what I had to say, I guess. Thanks for watching, as always, and I will see you later.